Yo everybody, what's going on? This is Keegan from Kman Reviews. If you enjoyed this review, make sure you hit that like and the subscribe button, and if you have any opinions at all that you would like to share, make sure to leave them down in the comment section. Nosgov, 2mg. Nosgov is a Polish singer, songwriter, and producer, an artist who has been circulating around my Discord server from a regular member in specific. By the way, link in the description if you want to come join that as well. And the request was finally dropped not too long ago for me to cover what I believe is Nosgov's third album, 2mg or 2 milligrams, however it's labeled, released very late in 2019. We got 23 tracks on the docket, so strap in. We got a long one today. What are my thoughts on this album? Let's find out as I review it track by track. Since I'm not sure if there were any singles, we will just start at the top of the track list, with that being CYBERANGEL Anthem, which opens up with some glossy, icy synth work that quickly morphs into almost like a DJ mix. The looped Sandy grazes with these vocals and triplet synths. It's almost as if I'd expect a pop beat to drop in. Once the actual track does come in, it's very dense, and that semblance of rhythm is practically lost underneath the smothering vocal work until the snare taps reveal themselves to return the beat. And before you know it, the track is already over, left to a distorted bass-assisted fade-out. It's a solid enough opener, I just don't feel like it hits as hard as it could have. Detergent seems to be the big hit from this. It's the most streamed track here. It's the one that the requester actually told me was a banger over any other track, and I do agree, although I do think there are stronger bangers in here. Regardless, the song opens up with a fitting build-up. It's like the fog slowly rolling over the landscape. The bass is very prominent on this one, while the muted hissing of the hi-hat ties the track together very nicely. Vocal work is also solid. I'm not the biggest fan of the really high-pitched vocals, which I feel like is going to be a consistent complaint for me throughout this record. It's not ear-gratingly annoying, but it's just not my preferred vocal effort for this style. I typically like the darker, more like Blades monotone style. As a whole though, I do say this song is pretty good. By My Side gives me some pretty heavy Blade influence. The way this song flows, cycling between these soft breakdowns and very distorted bass heavy and also slightly sparse banger moments. The vocals yet again play to that distorted side, and the way they're done almost blend in with this beat to the point where you can barely make it out. That's an effect I do enjoy, but I think this is my favorite track so far. Drill is one of the two very short tracks here, this one being the shortest at 1 minute and 13 seconds, and it's fine. I like the bubbly, plunky synth work, the vocals play well off some of those higher moments, but there's no bass or hi-hat here. I would have loved to see this song fully visualized with a more complex beat. It does transition very nicely into the next track though, so I can give it props for that. It's Like I Cannot Breathe featuring Capo XXO, and this is a pretty damn great banger. It kicks off very strong with rupturing bass, glitchy yet jubilant synth work. Cap's vocals come first, and he's got a very drony, slurred, kind of rough delivery, slathered in auto-tune, but he flows over the beat well and introduces a firm melody to the song, even if I can't make out a damn word he's saying. Nosgov's vocals are much smoother and angelic in comparison, only multiplying that melody a few extra notches. Yeah, I really like this. We'll definitely be keeping this one around, even if the outro is unnecessarily long. Forget Again featuring Senses has one of the sweetest and most appealing synth presences on the entire album. It's very sugary and pillowy, reminds me of Blade's later albums that I love a lot, and the clicky prominence of the hi-hat certainly plays into that as well. These vocals are actually pretty solid. They're still very warped and mangled by obscene processing and effects, but they carry out this melody well. Yeah, this is a good track here. One More Clue is an alright song. I'm not crazy about this one. It doesn't do anything bad at all, but just doesn't feel standout, which, not gonna lie, isn't a good sign going into track 7 of 23. Regardless, it's yet again got some good twinkly, starry synths kicking off the build-up that amplify when the bass comes in. I do like the vocals here much more than some of the other tracks. They feel more soulful, but the song as a whole doesn't do anything standout. It follows a very similar formula to a lot of the music I've heard in this genre, even down to the vocal melody as well. It's still an okay song, but it's just kind of that, okay. Grimy lives up to its name a little bit, with how brittle the ticking hi-hat is, the dense distortion that is the bass, the squealing synths. It's the most interesting song on the album so far. Even the breakdowns, which are usually pretty one note for this style of cloud rap, actually usher in a brief kind of beat change. Functions more like a bridge than a typical breakdown, and I love it. Vocals are amazingly executed here. They play well to a lot of the higher pitched accoutrements scattered across the song. Overall, an easy album highlight. Don't Make a Sound is a little bit of a slower, moodier song. It doesn't really hit any of the banger requirements. I like the bubbly bass popping in the background, meanwhile these shotgun blasts of synths fill up the mix and prevent it from being despondent. Vocal work is solid here, although I don't think it plays as well as it could have. Maybe a bit more gentle, whispery delivery would have worked better with the minimalist beat. Aside from that, this one's solid. Messed Up is a song I don't like. I don't care for this one at all. Messed Up may actually be an appropriate title because it was like there was several production issues here. For one, the bass is very quiet, which that in itself is not an issue, but compared to the rattling hi-hat that is so unbearably loud in this mix, the combination of the two is just very jarring. The second is more of a personal one, but the way the vocals, and more specifically the melody, is just offbeat is not for me. I know other people who will love it, and if you love it too, then that's great, but it's just not my thing. One other point too is that the breakdown is like falling into the void. The song just completely vanishes, which kind of kills the point of a breakdown really. I don't know, the track just did not click with me. Easily my least favorite so far. Giving Up has a bit more of a mellow, slower vibe than Don't Make a Sound did, but is definitely more on the banger side, and I enjoy it. It's got a very solid vibe with the zipping shrill synths and a slightly muted yet still hard addition of the bass and hi-hat. Nosgov works more of her singing here than normal, and it sounds pretty okay. Maybe a little bit overly drony, but it's not a glaring hindrance to the track at all. I'm not crazy about the outro being 20 seconds long though. I don't see what the silence adds to it, but it is still a good song. My Heart is a track I'm very conflicted on. I love parts of this like the beat, the plunky synths, the minimal yet still impactful bass, and the hi-hat all come together for one of the most tried and true banger formulas on the album. However, the vocals are just a bit too exaggerated for me, a little bit overly pitchy and auto-tuned. Even when they get to that higher end, it doesn't ruin the vibe, but it's pretty unappealing, at least for me. Those kind of balance out for me in the end and leave me with okay feelings on this one. Haunted pretty much has the exact same synopsis I gave to My Heart just previously. This beat is great, fantastic even. The video game chiptune wall of synths, the quaking bass deserves a lot of praise. It's arguably even more grimy than grimy. However, the song just loses me with the vocals. They're a high-pitched, kind of piercing, and practically muffle the sound of this beat, which is just not a fun listen. It distracts from the best elements of the song and kind of deserves to pass in and of itself. Let It Roll is an odd song, not necessarily in any bizarre instrumentation. I like the rattling crashes of the hi-hat and bass, and the vocals, while still not my cup of tea, are better than they were on previous tracks. But is it just me, or is this song just absurdly quiet? I went and revisited other songs from the album before and after this one because I thought something was just starting to die in my headphones, and most of them sounded just fine. Why is this one so quiet? You can barely make out if there's any synth work at all with a risk of shattering your eardrums when the song's over. Yeah, this one was really just not it. Pass. Wrong, which is by far the longest track here at 4.5 minutes, and this track has some real emotional baggage to it. One thing that really sells that for me is this is the first track that incorporates some acoustics, and quite a lot of them too. There's some sweet guitar plucking, the percussion feels very intimate, slow, and honest. Nosgov's vocals play to that style, displaying a more depressing, vulnerable cadence. The pitching effects aren't bad at all, and I kind of thought that the length would be a hindrance when I heard the tone of the song, but it's really not. The stylistic change is so nice to hear. Really love this, one of the best highlights here by far. Leak brings the album right back to its typical style, and this is pretty good. I really like the vocal melody on this one in particular, very smooth, and the vocals feel less drony than they did on some of the other songs, which is also nice. The beat's pretty solid, some crystalline buzzing synths in the background, led forward by the hi-hat and bass. I also like some of the cheesy samples you can expect from this kind of music, little scattered references here and there. It's nice, all around good song. Dandelion, which seems to be another one of the more appreciated cuts in this backstretch of the album, and I really do see why. I love the glossy vibe the track has, the synth blanket all across it is loud but oddly cozy as well, and the hi-hat and bass are perfect and don't distract from the vibe of the song. The vocal work, however, is a bit quieter than I would like. It tends to get a bit hidden behind the sheer magnitude of synths, but overall, I get the appeal behind this one. Great song. Not Sorry has a bit of a slower, vibier synth melody, one that I think really stands out in the album, especially when paired with Nosgov's higher-pitched vocals, which to my surprise don't really get on my nerves that much. The bass and hi-hat here too gives some amazing punch to the beat, still managing to tack on a bit of a banger to this song. It's pretty good, I could definitely return to this one. Rubber Band is another personal favorite for me on the album. I just love how shiny and polished the track is with the glistening synths humming in the background, a very serene and luscious vocal melody here with the pitching being so extreme it almost comes off just like a second synth line. I love the sharper hi-hat as well, it accents the beat nicely even if I feel like the bass could be a smidge more impactful. Regardless, pretty great song here. Nodding Off is another okay song. I'm not too crazy about this one, to be honest. The beat just feels very frail and skeletal compared to some of the density displayed by this album in its earlier moments. The little synth slashes are nice. I think they help light up the song in an appealing way, but there's next to no bass work done across the song, and the hi-hat as a result just feels very weak. It's not abysmal at all, there are definitely worse here, but I just don't get much out of this one. Shame is probably the most hyperpop song on the album, and really I wouldn't even fit it in that category, but the bluntness of the drumming combined with the typical pitched vocals just seem to solidify that genre description for me. The synths barely leave a dent in the mix. You can kind of make out the sweeter ambience they present, but this is mostly percussion driven, and it's not bad at all. I quite like it. Clown is probably one of the most forgettable songs on the record. It's not bad, in fact it does a lot of the same stuff that a bulk of the album does, but just with its placement in the album and the plethora of songs that came before it, it does very little to stand out. The synth melody whistling behind the colder hits of the hi-hat, it just feels like a chillier song with minimal bass, solid vocal effort too, a little bit quiet but an intangible critique. It's just a solid song, I guess. And finally, the closer, Playing God, is a brief 1 minute 20-second closer to the album, and this opens up with these synths that sound like they're mimicking an emergency alarm. They slowly fade out after half a minute and then return not long after. That's really the whole song. I guess there's also some extra warped pulses of synths. The song has no vocals at all, no hi-hat or bass, just kind of seems like an instrumental outro. Overall, this album was an interesting listen. I have a decent chunk of thoughts about this. For one, it's too long. Over an hour of this sound, at least for me, is way too much. Blade kind of has the perfect balance for that because none of his albums go over 50 minutes, so that strikes a pleasant chord with me. This more distorted and pitchy take on cloud rap just can't keep me too invested for a full hour. Which brings up another point I want to mention, and this is kind of the main point here. I feel like this album wasn't meant to be enjoyed as a full cohesive experience. I'd strongly bet that anyone out there who's a fan of this album likely listened to it once, handpicked singles here and there that they enjoyed, and just kind of left it at that. You get the best of the album without any of the extra filler. And inherently, that creates a bit of a double-edged sword situation in my review format, where the tracks are often quite good, competently produced, and have that sugary and glossy cloud rap that's very appealing, but they don't shine as bright in a full album experience, especially over an hour and 20 plus tracks. I mean, filler materializes there by design. As a whole though, I did come out of this with a positive experience, even if I will likely never return to the full listen. I'm feeling a 6 out of 10 on this album. Well guys, hope you enjoyed that review. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.